three most affected industries by the pandemic, was airlines, hotels, and sports.
Right.
Hospitality, leisure, and tourism, and
right.
We fit right in that.
Yeah.
I think it's been a difficult time for everybody, but it's also been a chance to hit the reset button,
right,
and to really think about how we do things differently and what it is that we need to concentrate on. I got some opportunities to consult on some projects with Nike, for example,
nice.
Where we were focusing on things like the millennials and
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Sporting World podcast. And today I'm here with Deepak. And Deepak, how are you first and foremost? And thank you for taking the time. How's life in London these days? I know you're, at AMOS Sport Business School campus there. How's everything going?
Yeah, listen, thank you so much for the invitation. Thanks for having me on. It's a little cold here in London, but we're managing. We're managing.
All right.
I'm joining you from the AMOS campus, actually here in London. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure having you part of this podcast. Of course, we're going to dive a lot into your massive experience, as a consultant in the sport industry. And I think, we always kind of start with a warm-up question, kind of like just getting people to understand how did your journey in the sport industry begin? Just take us a little bit back, before you started your full consultancy journey, but take us through how it all started.
No, sure, no problem. It's going back a while now, but look, I had a dream that I wanted to be a professional tennis player. And for me, that didn't work out, so like many of the students, they want to have a career as an athlete, and then they have to have a tough conversation with themselves at some point where they say, okay, this is not going to happen for you. So you have to pick a different route, pick a different way in your journey. But one of the things that I realized is that, I do have a good business brain, and that, perhaps I can start focusing, even though I can't, play the game on the court at the level that I wanted to in order to become pro. Yeah. Perhaps I can, I can manage what happens behind the scenes, perhaps I can run events, I can help train people, I can, manage operations. So I did my undergraduate program in sports science and sports psychology, and I started really gearing up towards working in events and event management, and started focusing on really that aspect of the sports business. So for me, I was trying to build the skills very early on that would help me in terms of managing events and training people and things like that. And that's really kind of how I started. Right. That kind of helped me get to kind of where I am today.
Awesome. And I think you're bringing up something, very familiar to most people, I guess, in a sense, that are working in sports or are, someone in the sport world. Is like, it all started with like that, sport player, athlete, dream that we all have. I had a similar, at least for me, it was, football, soccer for our American viewers. And, it's just that essence. I think like for me, it was like, I was 16 and I was like, do I really have what it takes to be kind of like, the level that I really want to do? And then I was like, probably not. So I just, went into coaching, just started building more on that side, because for me as well, it was kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do if I can't work with sports? There's really nothing else for me.
And it's a really tough conversation to have with yourself, because your ego doesn't want you to say, you can't do this, right. Try. So it's a tough conversation, but listen, at some point you do have to have that conversation. You've got to pick a track that makes sense for you,
Right. Plus you can always play sports on your spare time anyways, it's not like you have to stop. Yeah. Maybe not on the highest level, but you can always play tennis, you can always, play football, with your friends, and have teams as well. So there's always way to be involved, of course, but exactly not at the highest professional level.
It might not be on the center court at Wimbledon, but you can still dream.
Exactly. There's always dreams and hopes. Yeah. But let's move a little bit forward into the consulting side of your experience. And obviously you've been doing that for many years in the industry, working with top clients across the world. And I guess for those that are like, coming in here, like consultancy is like a lot of different things. It's a lot of cases and topics that you have worked on. But let's touch upon like some of those, cases, topics that you have consulted on, and sort of like just bringing an idea of like what are the typical cases that you're involved in.
Well, I mean, I think this is where I like the variety of the job, because there are no real typical cases. The way that sports industry kind of is that you build kind of on your experience, and you're going in to help solve a problem, and that's typically what a consultant does, right? A consultant goes in from outside the organization to either add value towards or help solving an organization, a sports organization in this case, solve a problem. So, for me, I've been, very lucky that I've got to work on some topics that actually mean a lot to me. So, for example, diversity and inclusion. That's something that I have not only a keen interest in, but that's a strong value that I have as well. And, sport is an example, to all when it comes to things like diversity and inclusion. 100%. So I've worked on things like, building international fan experiences, training volunteers, engagement of volunteers in sporting events, and of course the D&I piece that I just mentioned. So I think I like the diversity of different things that you can do from a consultancy standpoint, and how you can help integrate those things within organizations.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess like, since we are officially recording the episode on, the 8th of March, the Women's International Day, I think we have to just touch upon like a case within the diversity and inclusion aspect. Like what are some of the examples, if you can nitpick or go a little bit deeper into one of those cases?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the cases is how do we increase the representation of Hispanics in tennis in the United States.
Right.
When you consider, the first language spoken in cities like Los Angeles and Miami is Spanish and not English, and these are key hub cities.
For sure.
So what are we doing in terms of marketing? What are we doing in terms of encouraging more Hispanic tennis players at all levels? College level, 10 and under in terms of the kids. And professional athletes, in terms of that. So I think it's interesting when you come up with some of these strategies and you think about what it is that you need to, I mean, it could be something as simple as, do we realize that none of our communication materials are in Spanish?
Right.
It could be something as simple as that.
Yeah.
To something a bit more complex in the sense that, maybe we've got to really understand the culture in a bit more detail and realize that, look, tennis is a sport that you can play together. Tennis is a sport that you can play as a family. And, perhaps that fits in with the family values side of things, so there's lots of different things I think that you can, that you can do, but you're essentially, what starts off as something that perhaps, you look at and you say, well, this is, it's kind of the right thing to do, or it's a nice thing to do, but you actually realize that, all of those things, there's a strong business connection too. I mean, there's a strong business case to it as well. When you can tie those things up, I think that's what we see. But I mean, right now, I mean, you look at these last 2 years, inclusivity has been, really the hot topic when it comes to, nearly all sports federations, sports events, organizations, in so many ways. So I mean, I think we're right to talk about it and to bring it up.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's why it's so key as well to just think about, like, of course, like, people always focus on like, oh, what are the big things that we can do? But sometimes it started as something simple as just like, okay, adapt and change the language, or like add the language to maybe Spanish or whatever it is, to kind of like have a better inclusion in that aspect. So there's already minor things I think people can do if they just take that first step, maybe get like out a little bit of their bubble that they're usually in, and that's also where you come in and can nitpick a little bit there. And sometimes you need someone from the outside as well to see those things.
Absolutely. And, in my experience, I will tell you that often people don't make the changes that they can make because they think that change is only big change.
Right.
So they don't realize that actually all these little changes that they make actually add up to something quite significant.
Oh, yeah.
But what actually stops a lot of people from making that change in the first place is that, they look at the big changes, and if they can't make big changes, they don't make any change.
Yeah, yeah.
So, those small changes actually are really important because, that sets the momentum.
Right. And then it's also sort of like part of building that, game plan, I guess, in a sense, to perhaps what they see as that, big change, down the road. But in often cases with big changes, it takes time, but you got to start, sort of like, building your milestone pad and say, okay, what we're going to do kind of like right now. And like we're developing a platform, right, which, need new features, tiny things here and there. And there's always, things that, you can tweak or fine tune, just to kind of like complete that end goal of making, the best possible platform. And that's just part of the journey. And so you have to understand that. And yeah, it's a really valid point you bring up, and sort of just thinking that, okay, if we have to solve the challenge, we have to go big right away. But understanding those little milestones along the way is part of reaching that goal that you might reach in, maybe a year or two, or maybe even 5. It can take time to do those changes.
Absolutely.
But it's part of the journey. But let's go a little bit forward, I guess, like to more obviously recent time with the pandemic, been happening the last few years, still going on. Always some crazy stuff in the world happening. Also, we're not going to go in details with everything, but if you wanted to like talk a little bit about like specifically, during and through the pandemic, like what are some of the key cases you have consulted on? And I wanted to also touch a little bit upon the Tokyo Olympics 2020, which obviously got majorly impacted by the pandemic, and to just talk a little bit about like some of the, I guess, main cases that came up during the pandemic from your side.
Yeah, sure. It's no secret that the 3 most affected industries by the pandemic was airlines, hotels, and sports.
Right.
Hospitality, leisure, and tourism, and
right.
We fit right in that.
Yeah.
I think it's been a difficult time for everybody, but it's also been a chance to hit the reset button,
right,
and to really think about how we do things differently and what it is that we need to concentrate on. I got some opportunities to consult on some projects with Nike, for example,
nice.
Where we were focusing on things like the millennials and how we increase the use of things like the app for things like mental health and well-being.
Right.
And then attaching those things, which I think has become very important, because I think in this time period, people have become a lot more open about talking about things like mental health, which affects everybody. So, right. And now, of course, we see a lot of mainstream athletes talking about those challenges and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been something that I think is interesting. The other point I would say is focusing on how we move the fan experience online. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times, especially when you've got these world-class sporting events, we're working with companies and organizations and teams to build these amazing fan experiences in stadia. Right. And in and around the events.
Yep.
But of course, in this time we've had to do things differently because fans aren't allowed to go to events.
Right.
So right. We've had empty stadiums. So how then do we still engage the fan at home? Mm-hmm. How do whether it's at-home workout with Venus Williams, or whatever it is, but playing a video game, with Andy Murray, or whatever. Right. But again, having to think about different ways of still keeping those fans engaged and still keeping their zest for sport going, but having to do it from their home. Right. And so in this case, we've had to think about, for example, making athletes more accessible. We've had to think about those kinds of things. So it's been quite interesting in terms of really leveraging technology from both aspects, actually, from the fan experience aspect, but from also the work that I was doing for Nike. So I think that's been interesting. The other point that you mentioned is obviously, the Tokyo Olympics. I mean, I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges for everybody that has been associated with those games. Nobody has written a rule book on how you run a world-class Olympic Games during a pandemic. So, it's a case of try this and see if it works. And if it doesn't, adapt this and try this and see if it works. And if it doesn't, adapt this. So I think it's a very kind of interesting journey, because, I mean, look, a month before the Olympics, many athletes didn't even know if they were going to board the flights to go to Tokyo. So, there was so much kind of going on. And then when the Japanese government kind of banned business travel and then said, no spectators and things like that, that kind of threw quite a lot of challenges and things like that. So I think it's interesting because, it's a great case study to look at for the future. Because, my opinion is, Tokyo they did a great job with all things considering, and the challenges that they faced and how they addressed those challenges and how they persevered and didn't give up. I think that, the end product was great, but the challenges were so obvious, in terms of what was going on.
Yeah, and I think you're touching upon something, really important in terms of that this case and this, kind of happening with the Tokyo Olympics set sort of like in many ways a benchmark, for future events and major sports events, and perhaps even not even just sports events, but global events across the world in terms of because I mean, to be fair, there are going to be more pandemics happening down the road probably anyway. So now at this point, you're kind of okay, how do you, prepare and learn, from this event and the challenges that we're facing, so you're much better prepared, down the road, and at least, if something comes up, you sort of have that guidelines. But there will always be, new challenges coming up, but I think it sets a lot of frameworks, and you're talking about it's a nice case and a nice, study in a sense as well for the upcoming leaders, the young generation that are coming up. You're what are some things that you would kind of, recommend them to kind of, I guess, in a sense, dig a little bit deeper into and kind of look into now that, the Olympics is, kind of been a little bit time after it happened, you started to get some more information, more of the, data that has been, collected after it's come in, what are some things that, those students and future leaders should kind of keep an eye on or look after in terms of evaluating this and trying to learn a little bit what they can bring to the table moving forward?
I mean, I think one of the key things that you have to be now is flexible. You have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable. Many organizations and businesses, have had to cut their staff during these times. People have had to take on multiple roles and multiple positions and things like that. And, I mean, I've been in the industry now, 15 years, and I can tell you, my roles and responsibilities and things like that have increased. Just because of the workforce has got less and that happens. But I think one of the most important things that we have to do is we have to have an open mind. And we have to be flexible and open to change. A lot of the times I find, students are very well-meaning, but they're not always as adaptable as they should be, because in their minds they want to be a marketeer, or they want to be, there's a certain path or a certain position, and they kind of have, but sometimes you have to go through A, B, C to get to D. And I think right now we are definitely in the environment where that's the case. So 100%. I think exercising patience, but also having an open mind is just crucially important. I actually think, though, that being in the pandemic and stuff actually provides new opportunities. It's not all, people think, oh, well, are there going to be jobs, especially if the sports industry is so impacted? I think there will be. I think, the opportunities, there's definitely a lot of opportunities and a lot of newer ones that perhaps we didn't think about in the past.
Right.
But I do think that it's important to do that. The other thing I think it's important, and this is more for, when the students become leaders,
right,
is it's very important for them to focus on, when they're training people, to make sure people not only have the right skills to do the position, but also the right mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because one of the things that, we often think about is, do you have the right skills to do this particular job? Do you have the right functional ability to do this particular job?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is so important now, especially in these times, is, do you have the mentality? Mm-hmm. How positive are you? How much of a team player are you? How engaging are you? How can you motivate somebody who's not having a great day?
Yeah.
All of those things matter.
Yeah.
So, that's, I think, those are some things that perhaps we don't often think about, but they're equally important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it brings up a really, so some key elements for these, students and young professionals to kind of, start evaluating yourself a little bit on, like, where am I at, and like, how do I adapt? And I mean, like, I think there's a lot of people there that have like this, common goal to, like, I want to be like, sports director of Barcelona or like Real Madrid or what it might be, right? And I mean, like, of course, that's great, and you should have those goals and aspirations for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. But understanding that, okay, but it's gonna take you, maybe 20 years before you reach that goal. And so, what can you do along the way, and step by step, and especially now where we talked about, the flexibility and adaptability to the needs that are in the market right now. It's a completely different need, after or during the pandemic, in terms of what kind of roles are more important, because of, again, like the what can I say, like the limitations that was happening in the organizations, and excluding, a lot of people, and creating, some challenges there. But I wanted to go, like, moving forward now a little bit into, your work with AMOS Sport Business School. Obviously, you're a global ambassador there. You're doing some teaching, some I guess, like, some great, educating for some of the future leaders, that are at least, studying there. And I know you're, busy at some other programs and schools too. But when we're talking about the AMOS Sport Business School, like, tell us a little bit more about how this, I guess, relationship started with them, and what makes, AMOS unique from your.
I mean, I think it's a first of all, it's a great school. It's a great school, and I like what they stand for. I've been now here at AMOS in a principal role for now 4 years, and I will say that I really believe in the program, but I believe in the way that we deliver it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's I think it's important to have, especially when it comes to education and sport education, I think it's very important to have a solid program.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that's even more important is making sure that you've got the right people to deliver it. Mm-hmm. So I know that, here, in London, one of the things that we really focus on is having industry professionals that are experts in their area. Right. But obviously that, they understand the academic nature of the course, but at the same time, they can apply that theory to practice because of the real life experience that they have. Mm-hmm. And then they can bring that into the classroom. Right. So I think, what that makes a massive difference. Before this interview, I was just teaching a class, and the class was on the organization of the US Open. How do we make this a world-class sporting event? How do we make it a prestigious Grand Slam event? And I think, that's the thing. I mean, we focus on the practicalities as well of how to get, because ultimately that's what the students are going to be doing, right? They're going to be in sports business practitioner roles. Yep. So I think it's important for them, to get all of the foundations that they need from both perspectives, the academic and the industry perspective, so that they can build upon this. And I think, the thing that I love about, the thing I love about AMOS, in particular is it's a great team. It sounds cliche, but it's so true. I mean, it's a great team of people. And I think, the way that people carry out their jobs here is that they really care about the student experience.
Right.
And that's, for me, I mean, this is a small campus, so you come to this campus, you're not going to get, the massive UCLA style campus. You're not going to get that when you come here, but what you will get is you will get individual attention. You will get, I give almost 300 hours a year of mentoring, to students. So you will get that you will get that individual attention. You will get people that, care about your progression and people that guide you, towards going where you want to go.
Right.
And you have accessibility. My office door is always open, so students can come and see me at any time. So I think, that's the one thing. And I know that a lot of people, maybe, a lot of schools can say something similar, but I think the fact is, the fact that I'm here day in, day out, and I see it, and we live it and we breathe it, I think that makes a massive difference. So, I think that that's important. I also think it's important for students to see somebody in front of them that is in a position that they would like to be in.
Right.
I think that also makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
So we've got, really some great industry practitioners. We've got Henry from the NBA, we've got myself, involved in tennis and the Olympics, and we've got Ian in stadium and development, and, Dave in sponsorship. So we've got, many people.
Right.
But I think it's really important for them to be able to, for students to be able to see, to look at, the person standing in front of them and say, actually, that's somebody who their job interests me. Maybe I can see something there.
Right.
So I think that makes a difference.
100%. And I think this is very key as well, not only from a learning standpoint, but also again, exploring the opportunities that are in the industry and kind of be more aware of those, through the program, through, the different kind of courses and lectures that they have, so they can kind of perhaps figure out that there's more to the world than just working in football, which many things.
Exactly.
I mean, of course, go for it if you want to do it, but also understand that there's many ways, and many sports and sectors to be involved in. Lastly, as well, while we're sort of in that educational bubble, in a sense, I wanted to talk a little bit about what type of content and subjects you've been, I guess, elevating recently. Obviously you've been speaking and educating the future leader industry in multiple countries, but what are some of recently now, what are some of the content and subjects that you've been pushing or focusing a lot on?
You mean for me as a practitioner?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I would say obviously the leadership part, the managing people part is an important piece of what I do, and I think that's consistent across the board. But I think the one thing I've seen that has changed recently more so is the focus on empathy. It's the focus on really understanding people. People have gone through a rough time, these last 2 years. And that's whether it's students, that's whether it's staff, that's whether it's, other people that are leading other people. I mean, people have gone through, at the end of the day, forget your role, forget your title, people are people. So, people have gone through that. And I think one of the most important leadership skills that I've been focusing on recently, especially with my professional work, is making sure that people understand the importance of empathy. And, understanding that, again, as a leader, the importance of, often we think about, leading through example, but we forget about the importance of listening, and we forget about the importance of, kind of understanding people. And that has become really very prevalent, but very important. And I think this last 2 years has reminded us of the fact that we do need to get back to basics, in some way, and just kind of go back to understanding, what makes people human, what makes people tick, and those kinds of things. So I think, it sounds very simplistic, and it sounds also a little cliche, but it's very important. I mean, it's incredibly important. So I would say, a lot of the work that I have focused on recently has been in that space, because that's something that has affected everything that I do, whether it's education, whether it's sport, whether it's, students or colleagues.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well to not only, of course, based on what's happened, but also in an essence, I think for the students and young professionals as well to, that are, in sports, and in many cases you kind of like see this glamorous world, right? And I just want to bring up like a personal story. Of course, at the end of the day, it's your podcast. You want to share as much about.
Oh, please, please go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
But it reminds me a lot of like when I did so back 10 years probably at this point. So I did my internship at the Norwegian Football Association, and so working in the hallways there was like, all the professional like national team players from the 90s, the big time of Norway, and I was like remembering my first week there, I was like, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy. I was so starstruck, right? And you kind of like have this feeling, and then I remember like, oh, this is so strange. And then you kind of like talk with everyone and you just realize, well, at the end of the day, we're all just people. There's people are people. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I think what you're saying here is so important. And it's a good, now more than ever for also students to understand at the end of the day, like all those people that you may be seeing on the screen that are working now, in the club or in that organization, at the end of the day, they're just people like you and me. We're all here to try to make the industry better, to try to keep moving forward. And, it's cool that, okay, now you can utilize your knowledge and skill set to come together, work together, and hopefully have an impact on the industry. So that was just a tiny little, side story.
No, I mean, it's so true. I mean, it's so true. And I think that's the thing, I think we are all, again, we're all in this together, and these stories, I mean, I think they make a massive difference, because they actually, people relate to these stories.
Yeah, and I mean, like that's why I feel like if there's one thing people should really take from this podcast, it's people are people, and think about it, sit down and understand that, it's now more than ever, we all have the same challenges. We're struggling with a lot of different things, and at the end of the day, we're just people, and we can help each other to go forward and help each other through some challenges times, that we all have more than ever. And I think it was important as well what you talked about before in terms of, it's been more I guess easier and facilitated in a sense from organizations, from brands, to talk about these challenges too. And it's been very vital, I think, for a lot of people during the pandemic. And so like I guess to finalize the podcast in an essence, I just wanted to like, obviously you gave a lot of insights, knowledge, some key advice here as well. But if you wanted to like, I guess give like a few final tips, for students that are looking to get a career in the sport industry, what would it be?
I think the most important thing is to build genuine relationships. And I think that, in my experience, it's not something that students do enough of. I think, we talk about networking, but networking is more than just asking a couple of questions to a guest speaker.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's important to seek guidance. It's important to seek mentoring. And, I think, a lot of the time students are afraid to kind of do that just because they're not used to doing it.
Right.
And also, many perhaps will think, but maybe they wouldn't be interested in having a conversation with me, but the amount of, I will say that, the amount of students that have gone and tried it and pushed themselves to kind of, build these relationships and things like that, successful people want to give back. And, they want to give advice, and they want to, so, if they can, then they will. And to me, I think, seeking that guidance and mentoring is it's so important, because you're building good, genuine connections in the industry. Right. I think, one of the issues that I see, or one of the challenges that I see, is that often, students will ask for something before they've built a relationship. Can I have an internship? Can I have an interview? Whatever it is. And the thing is, whilst, yes, I mean, it's good to be brave, and it's good to kind of put yourself out there. A better way to do it is to build trust, and a better way to do it is to build that foundation. So a lot of the times, and you can start with the people that are closest to you. For example, the people in your campus. Right. So I mean, there's a lot of ways in which you can do this, but I would say, for me, the number one thing that impresses me is when students come and and they ask me to get a coffee with them, and
Right.
they talk to me about things that are important to them, and they build that. And that's how you really get to know the motivations of this student. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, if there's a project that I think that they would be suitable for, I'm going to think of that student first, because I know them, I can trust them, I've built a relationship with them. So I think one of the most important things is to do that, because that helps establish not only your credibility, but it helps inform people of who you are. And it helps people understand, where you want to go. And I think that's a big, that really does help you, but it also helps the person who's trying to help you as well.
100%. I think it's a perfect way, to wrap up this podcast with, Deepak. Yeah, it's a really good advice, and I mean, like, I don't want to say anything more, because it's just a perfect way to wrap it up. So with that, Deepak, I would like to thank you once again for taking the time, for being with us and for sharing all your insights and knowledge with the Sporting Global community. And for those of you, of course, that have been tuning all the way at the end, make sure to like the video and subscribe as well if you haven't already. And if you haven't, make sure to sign up at sportingglobal.com. It's free. You can connect with people, you can find relevant opportunities, and get good knowledge and find good programs like the one from AMOS. So make sure to do that. And yeah, once again, thank you so much, Deepak, for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's very kind you having me on, and I appreciate it. I enjoyed it, so thank you so much.
I'm glad to hear it. And I do have one final tradition that we do here at the Sporting Global podcast, that I have to put up a little bit of a challenge every time. It's kind of like what we do. So I have to teach you a little bit Norwegian, as we are Norwegian, as I am Norwegian. There's a thing we do. And so with every it's always fun, and so with every video we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means see you later in Norwegian. So that's what you have to say.
Okay. Vi snakkes.
There you go. Perfect. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
I don't know if I can put Norwegian on my CV now, can I? After being able to say that?
Yeah, at least a tiny piece.
No, but honestly, thank you once again. I appreciate it.
Likewise, Deepak. Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.